This video is brought to you by Sailrite. Visit Sailrite.com for all your project supplies, tools, and instructions. In this video, we're going to show you how to reupholster a sofa sleeper, or sometimes referred to as a sofa bed. We'll be showing you every single step, including removal of the metal frame and also the old fabric to pattern for new fabric. If your sofa bed is no longer inviting, but still offers a comfortable seating area and a great place for guests to sleep, maybe it simply needs a new fabric upgrade. Reupholstering a sofa sleeper is a cost-effective way to add a touch of style, with the overall goal of trying to coordinate with other furniture and window treatments in the room. This is a full tutorial video. Every step will be covered. The techniques demonstrated in this video are rated in difficulty from medium to easy, even for a novice beginner. Here's Cindy to explain the process.
My name is Cindy Fletcher, and I own a business called Quilts and Cushions in Churubusco, Indiana. And I'm here at Sailrite today to recover this sleeper sofa with this fabric, and we'll show you how to do it from start to finish.
To reupholster our sofa sleeper, first we need to remove the sleeper section from the actual frame of the sofa. So we'll remove the cushions and pull out the sleeper. We've removed the mattress, and now we'll find the screws on the inside that attach the metal frame to the wooden platform of our sofa. We'll remove those screws so that we can remove the metal frame. Next, Cindy will show us how to remove the old fabric from the frame.
Okay, I'm going to start taking this apart, and most furniture comes apart about the same way. The outside back comes off, then the outside arms, inside arm. This piece will come off, and then this piece will come off. So as I take the pieces off, I'm going to number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I'm going to put them back on in opposite order.
Here we'll use a staple remover and remove the staples along the bottom edge. This is the back of our sofa sleeper. So first we remove the rear panel of fabric by removing the staples. After the bottom edge, the sides are next.
Now I'm going to remove the sides of this. There's a metal tack strip under here that we'll replace when we put the new piece back on.
You'll find the majority of sofas like this on the sides will have a metal tack strip. Take extra caution when removing these tack strips because the ends of the tacks are very sharp indeed. Once one side is removed, move to the other and do the same. The back of the sofa is the first panel to be removed. We'll call that number 1. We'll use a Sharpie marker and label it 1. It's also a good idea to put an arrow indicating the upside.
There's a cardboard tack strip up here at the top that we'll take out, and then this piece will come off completely. And it's also helpful to take pictures while you're doing this if you need to. That's okay too. That'll be a really big help when you put it back together. You can see that there's some staples here where they've attached this piece first with the staples before they put the cardboard tack strip on. The cardboard tack strip will help keep it straight and level all the way across.
So along the back of the sofa here, at the top edge, the cardboard tack strip kept the fabric straight, but before they used that, they stapled in the fabric at a few random spots just to keep the fabric in place.
These are all going to be thrown away and replaced with new ones.
Be careful when removing the tack strips from the fabric, but do not throw the fabric away. We're going to need it for patterning. The next panel to remove is the sides. We'll label it number 2 and start removing the staples from it as well.
I'm going to go back and hammer these little pieces in that I broke off just so they don't cut myself on them. Sometimes you have to move the furniture around in order to get to some of the staples, so I'm just going to lay this over like this in order to get to all of these staples. You want to do the best you can to leave the batting on the furniture and not on the fabric. And this piece right here also has a metal tack strip.
As with any metal tack strip, always be careful about being poked by the sharp spines or spikes of the metal tack strip. We're going to remove that tack strip and it will be replaced with a new piece. I know many people are deterred about redoing a sofa sleeper because they say it's heavy. But once the metal frame is removed, it is quite light indeed. You'll notice that throughout this video, some sections will be shown in double time to save time and also not waste yours.
Now I will have to take this piece of batting off.
The batting was tacked or stapled in a few spots to hold it in position so that it would not move when it was being upholstered. So Cindy is removing the staples that holds the batting in place. There are only a few of them. Don't throw away the batting. We may be reusing it. You will usually find a fabric layer underneath the batting that supports the batting. That needs to be removed as well.
This piece here will need to go back on. It's what's giving you support to the outside arm when you put your fabric back on there.
You can replace it if it's in bad shape, but typically it's in perfect shape, so we're going to try to reuse this to save money. It can be replaced with any type of scrap fabric if it needs to be.
Then there's a cardboard tack strip across the top of this also that needs to come off, and then this piece will come off completely.
After this cardboard tack strip is removed, panel 2 will be free to come off of the sofa. We'll need to repeat this process for the other side, doing the exact same thing. We will not show that. After this piece is removed, you may want to mark it with an arrow to indicate the up end.
So there's piece number 2. This is a third piece we're going to take off. Sometimes you might want to put an arrow as far as what's up on your pieces also. In order to take this piece completely off, we're going to have to take a little bit of this off. This is still number 4, not number 3, but right here you can see where it's attached on top of this one. So in order to finish this one, we're going to have to take some of this apart also.
If you have not upholstered a sofa, this is a good location to take a picture before you remove this, because you may get confused about how it went back together. But again, if your sofa is made in a similar fashion as ours, you can always refer back to this video. This backrest pillow is not only attached there at the top, but it also has a fabric pole. What a fabric pole is a scrap piece of fabric, or the same fabric, it doesn't have to be a different piece of fabric, that is used to pull the pillow in position to make it taut. It is attached back in the back here, in the inside of the sofa. So Cindy is removing the staples that hold that fabric pole in place. Once the staples are removed that hold it in place, Cindy can go to the front and pull that excess fabric out. This will allow her to access panel 3, or the inside side arm.
Now we can get to all of this under here.
Later on in this video, Cindy will refer to what I call the fabric pole as the stretcher, just for your information. On the inside of the chair, there is again another fabric pole that was used to tension panel 3. She's removing the staples on the inside back so that it can be removed completely. Continue working your way around the perimeter of this inside side panel, or panel number 3, until all the staples are removed.
Okay, we're going to peel the fabric away from the batting on the arm, and there's one more spot that's still attached. It's right here where it meets the front band. So we'll peel it back off to there, and you can see there's a real wide tack strip in there that we need to remove.
They used a cardboard tack strip there, but we're going to use a metal tack strip. We'll show that later on.
And there's a few more staples underneath here.
We're not going to show removing the inside side panel of the opposite side, but it's done in the same manner.
And there's number 3. And we're going to save these and use them for our pattern to make the new pieces. The next 2 pieces to come off are this front deck piece and the cushions across the back. So we're going to work on this one first. There's staples all the way across the bottom of this piece, and then on the inside, right underneath here, there's staples all the way across there also. So what we need to do is just remove all of those staples and this piece will come right off. So we'll make this one number 4.
For some reason, the staples are buried deeply into the fabric and the wood here, so we switched to a different type of staple puller that's also available at Sailrite, and it is working better.
That's better.
This staple remover has sharp prongs that can dig underneath the deeply buried staple to remove it. Here we're using wire cutters to pull out the staple. Obviously we're not trying to cut the staple, we're just trying to pull it out. Needle nose pliers or pliers can be used as well to do that. This is the upholstered fabric that covers what we call the front rail. Be sure to save this. This is panel 4.
The next piece we're going to take off, which will be number 5, is the 3 back cushions. They'll come off individually, they're not sewn together. So they're stapled here at the bottom in the back and at the top in the back. So this one will be number 5, and it is the left side facing cushion. So we're going to write left side facing. This one is also number 5, but it's the center cushion. And this is number 5, but it's the right side facing cushion. This part right here has a little bit of an angle to it, so you want to make sure you get that angle up next to the arm. And we have this one completely removed. You can see it's separate from the other 2. And you can also see that the outside cushions go on after the middle cushion goes on. And it has this big piece under here that keeps it so you can't see the batting in between your cushions. So the next thing we're going to do is take the right side facing cushion off, and then we'll take the center cushion off the same way that we took this one off.
Now that everything is removed, we can start to pattern new pieces. We're going to start with the front rail.
We're ready to put this first piece on the sofa, so I'm going to measure the length of this so that we can cut the batting and wrap this with batting to smooth all this batting out that's on here now.
We need enough batting to wrap around the top edge and the bottom edge and staple it in place.
So I'm going to cut my batting at 13 inches.
This is a polyester batting that's available from Sailrite. Its thickness when it's compressed is about 1/8 inch. When it's uncompressed, it's approximately 1/2 inch. The overall width of this polyester batting is around 55 inches. Throughout this entire upholstery job for the Sleeper sofa, we're going to be using the Sailrite short nose upholstery staple gun. This is a pneumatic staple gun, and we're simply tacking the polyester batting in place at the top edge on the inside top edge. Upholstery jobs like this do not require stainless steel staples. You can use a galvanized staple. The length of our staple leg is 3/8 inch. In almost all upholstery applications, we typically use a 3/8 inch leg staple. The only time that I usually switch to a shorter staple length, say 1/4 inch, is if I'm stapling through an application where the end of the staple may come through, like in cardboard or in a thin piece of wood. The width of our batting was not long enough to go across the entire front portion of this rail, so we added a secondary piece that is butted right up against the other, so there is no overlap.
Now our fabric isn't wide enough to go all the way across here in one piece, so we need to divide it into 3 pieces to match where the cushions are, because there's 3 cushions and it's already been seamed originally. So I'm just going to take this apart and make it again just like it is.
Here we're using the thread clipper Karura, or however you pronounce that. It's available at Sailrite. Visit the Sailrite website and pick your decor and upholstery fabric. We have thousands to select from.
So I'm going to start with the center piece.
For this upholstery job, we've decided to use a Sunbrella upholstery fabric from the Sailrite collection. Cindy has carefully pinned the old fabric in place with multi-use pins and now trims around the perimeter with scissors. We've chosen to use a Sunbrella upholstery fabric from the Saorite line or collection. But you will find hundreds, if not thousands, of upholstery fabrics in multiple brands that'll work great for a reupholstery job like this. Check it out at the Saorite website. How much fabric is required for my sofa? Well, visit the Saorite website and scroll down to the bottom and click on Fabric Calculator. There you will find a calculator for multiple projects. Click on Upholstery here. We'll click on Sofas and Sectionals. Now pick the appropriate size for your application and it'll tell you approximately how many yards are required. Remember to add additional fabric if your pattern has a repeat. For this sofa sleeper, we will use 14 yards.
Okay, this is the right side of this piece, so I'm going to cut one of this, and then I'm going to cut one the same for the left side to attach over here.
The sides are what's important because it'll be seamed together to make an overall length. But the top and bottom edges, those aren't really important to cut right along them. They can actually be a little bit longer because they'll wrap around and staple to the back side of the front rail. It's a good idea on the back side of the new fabric to mark it with an arrow indicating the top edge. That way you won't get confused.
We have these two pieces cut. This is the center and this is the left side, and I need a right side to attach over here. So I need one just like the left side. So I'm going to turn it over and lay it up here. And I want to make sure that the stripes match all the way across the front of the sofa. So I need to move it up to here to cut my next piece so that the stripes match the other two pieces.
Outside surfaces are facing each other, and now our pattern matches directly on top of the other one. Now she just needs to cut one exactly the same as this one in size. When Cindy pins new fabric on top of new fabric, she only needs to use a couple of multi-use pins. But when she pins the old fabric, which has been stretched and pulled a lot, it doesn't lay flat, so she has to use multiple pins in multiple locations to get it to lay nice and flat on top of the new fabric when she cuts it. You'll see that throughout the entire video.
Now I can pin these three together and sew them, and then I'll be ready to apply this piece to the furniture.
When sewing on the left side and the right side, be sure that outside surfaces face each other, and you will be using approximately a 1/2 inch seam allowance. She's going to use the multi-use pins and pin it together so that the patterns are directly on top of each other. So it will look like it's one piece of fabric rather than three pieces when she's done sewing. Now she can open it up and pin the right side to it.
So I'm pinning these three pieces together to sew them with a 1/2 inch seam. I'm making sure the arrows are all going up and that the stripe is matched.
And now we can take this front rail fabric to the sewing machine and sew those three pieces together with a straight stitch. We're going to use the Saorite Ultrafeed LS1 sewing machine. We're using a V69 nylon thread that's also available at Saorite. We have the machine set up to sew a 6mm straight stitch, though a 4mm would probably be better. We just didn't realize it when we started sewing this project. No problem, we'll switch that a little bit later on. Make sure you do some reversing at the beginning and the end of your stitching to lock your stitch in place. If you'd like to be sure that you get a 1/2 inch seam allowance, you can always use the deluxe 5.5 inch magnetic guide along the edge of the fabric. That ensures that you're always sewing a 1/2 inch away from the raw edge of the fabric. Now that those three panels are sewn together, we can attach them to the front rail.
I want to measure the back of this to find the center so I can get my seams centered. And it's 69 inches across there, so I'm going to make a mark at 34.5. Now I'm going to take my piece and fold the center in half and mark the center of that with just a little clip. And then I can line the clip up with my center mark on the wood.
We'll start stapling from the center position. Since the fabric that we've chosen for this upholstery job has a stripe, basically a stripe running along from left to right, we need to make sure that that stripe is directly on top of that front rail so it's nice and straight. So even though Cindy's not talking about that, she is doing that as she staples it in place along this top edge. Notice that she's working from the center out. She'll do that on the left side and the right side. Now she'll flip the sofa up so she can staple this batting a little bit better to the bottom edge. She didn't really do that initially when she secured the batting in place. Now she can pull that fabric around the bottom edge, making sure that it's nice and taut, and start stapling from the center out and working her way left and right. Along the bottom edge here, Cindy folds the fabric to create a hem, a single hem at the bottom edge. That does reinforce the fabric and make it tougher for the installation of the staples, but it's really not necessary. It's an extra step, meaning more labor and more time. There's nothing wrong with it at all. It does actually reinforce the fabric, but if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. Again, as this bottom edge of the front rail is stapled in place, be sure that your pattern is straight. Notice how she tensions the fabric with her hand with the band-aid on it. She runs the hand smoothly over the fabric and lays her hand nice and flat. That way she's tensioning a larger percentage than if you were to just grab the bottom edge of the fabric between your thumb and your forefinger. Grabbing the bottom edge with your thumb and forefinger and just pulling on it and then applying a staple basically creates kind of like hard spots. Doing it this way will prevent them. Let's touch one more time on the stapler that we're using. The stapler that we're using from Sailrite uses a crown length of a 1/2 inch. The standard crown length is usually 3/8 inch. Now, for a fabric application like this, that doesn't really have much implication on how the staple will staple into the fabric. But if you were stapling a seating vinyl, sometimes the 1/2 inch crown helps to prevent the staple from actually puncturing right through that seating vinyl.
Okay, now I have to get back into this corner again, so now I need to make this cut like the original piece was right here to go around this arm, and then this piece is going to pull underneath this foam.
So now that our fabric is in place, we know where we need to create the slit in the fabric. That's why we didn't create the slit earlier when we did our patterning. We like to create any slits for obstacles like this when the fabric is actually laying on the sofa. So Cindy is creating a slit with her scissors, and she needs to stop the slit a little bit shy of that armrest. Now you don't want it so shy that it creates a wrinkle. You want it as close as possible, but you wouldn't need to be able to remove the wrinkles when you tension the fabric, as you can see here. Now that she's happy with that slit, she can continue to staple all the way to the armrest. You should notice how that polyester batting that we added to this front rail helped to smooth out the fabric so it's nice and smooth. If we had not have added that, it would have possibly been a little bit bumpy because the batting that was originally in the sofa was kind of beat up a lot. Now the reason she's stapling here across this top edge is that this will be covered by the armrest fabric, so we don't have to worry about those staples being exposed. She's decided here that she needs more fabric slit. You can see there's a little bit of a wrinkle here. So she's going to try to get to the slit that she made previously and make it a little bit deeper here so that she can remove that little wrinkle. If you look closely here, you can see that piece of wood that she's trying to work her way around. When she's happy, she'll staple it in place. The wrinkle is removed. This will probably not be visible when the cushions are applied to the sofa anyway. Now she works her way the opposite direction, following that same procedure.
So after I made my cut in this side to go around the arm, I was able to pull this little piece through so I can tack it over here where I can get to it a little easier.
Along the bottom edge, she created a hem, so she doesn't have to worry about the fabric being too long. If you didn't create a hem, you may need to cut away the excess fabric. However, here along the bottom edge, the batting is sticking out, so she's trimming it so it doesn't show up when the sofa is complete. And now that the front rail is done, we're going to concentrate on the center back cushion.
We're ready to work on the back cushions on the sofa, and we don't need to use the roll batting on this because these are going to go over top of it, so it doesn't matter that this is a little bit lumpy. We'll just kind of put it back in place, and then we'll work right on top of it with these cushions. Remember that we marked the right side, the left side, and the center. And the center one goes on first because it has these long extensions to cover up where the cushions come together. So we'll start with the center. So we're going to take this apart and remake it just like it is now. This is a little bit sad, so we're going to add some batting to this cushion before we put it back together. Before I go too far taking this apart, I'm going to mark which is the top of these pieces so that I have an easier time putting it back together.
This is the old fabric, and Cindy's using a chalk pencil. Those marks typically usually come off of fabrics fairly easily with a wet rag. Removing the marks from this old fabric is not necessary, so you could use a permanent marker if you'd like. If this pillow seems confusing, you may want to take a few pictures of it before you take it apart. But for the most part, you'll be able to tell how it goes back together fairly easily. Here she is not cutting the old fabric, she's cutting the stitches out so that she still has a seam allowance. So all she has to do is use the old fabric to pattern for the new fabric. As you disassemble, you may want to pin the fabric back together so you know how it's reassembled.
Sometimes it's helpful to keep the pieces together so you understand how to put it back together when you get it all apart. Or you can use the other cushion as your guide when you're putting this back together.
This backrest may seem a little bit confusing. Seems like there's a lot of panels that are sewn together to give it shape, and there are, but it's relatively easy here. So don't be alarmed at the complexity of it. It's basically a front panel, a banding panel or boxing along the sides, and then a window frame in the back. Here Cindy's marking an arrow indicating the top portion of each one of these panels. She forgot to do that. So the arrow indicates the top edge of the pillow. After this panel is removed, she's going to use some multi-use pins to pin it together so she knows how it goes back together. One pin is sufficient.
Okay, I have this center back taken apart, and it's helpful to pin your pieces together as you take them apart so you know where they go back together, or you can use hash marks like this, and that'll show me that these two pieces go together, because I need to take this apart also. If you want to take pictures, you can. That helps also. It's just a process of doing one piece at a time so that you get it back together correctly, and you can refer to the other two pieces to help you put it back together right. Actually, I'm going to have to take these off. They're going to be in my way.
Now that this center backrest pillow or cushion has been disassembled, it's now time to pattern the new fabric from the old.
I'm going to fold this piece in half so that I can line up a stripe on the center of this piece so that I know the piece is straight. This is the center of the sofa.
So Cindy's saying that the fold in the center of this pattern is important to line up with the pattern of our new fabric, so it's nice and straight following that pattern. The sides may actually have some shape built into them, so it's not as important to have the sides following the pattern, but only the fold in the center. Once she's happy with it, she'll pin it in place with multiple multi-use pins. You don't want to just pin it at a few locations because there, again, is a lot of shape in this fabric since it's been stretched over time by use.
And these pieces are usually distorted just a little bit because the sofa's been used, and you don't have to worry about that. It doesn't have to be all smooth and flat.
You're probably noticing that she's only patterning half of the old fabric. What she'll do is she'll cut out the new fabric following half of that pattern, then she'll fold the new fabric back and create the second half. You'll see that in a little bit. Make sure you pin it as flat as possible, and make sure that you account for the half-inch seam allowance that was originally sewn in the old pattern.
And I'm also going to put pins here at the center and cut out half of it, and then flip this piece over to cut out the other half.
So these pins are placed in the new fabric right along that fold, the bottom edge and near the top edge, so she knows exactly where to unfold the new fabric once half of it has been patterned. It is important for this backrest pillow or cushion to be cut exactly the same size as the old one, following the curve. It does have some shape built into it. We are not stapling this in place, so we can't have any extra fabric at any of the edges here.
Before I take the pins out over here, I'm going to mark these little folds that make the cushion have its shape. So I'm just going to make clips.
Okay, you may be saying to yourself, what in the world is she talking about? Well, after she cuts these clips, we're going to show you the previous image of what the sofa looked like. So what these clips are is with the locations of each one of the pleats that creates a little bit of shape in these backrest or back cushions. So here the sofa is before we tore apart each one of these cushions, and you can see here at the top there are pleats, and there's also pleats at the bottom which you really can't see. That's what these little clips are. They indicate where each one of these pleats should be created in the pillow or the cushion. Here Cindy's just checking to make sure that she got every one of them before she unpins it. Now we can remove this fabric completely and fold the new fabric in half and create the second half.
Now I can fold that over and put my pins right in the center and cut the other half. Make sure your stripe is lined up going across.
It's folded directly on top of those pins that we placed on the center line, and it is lined up with the stripes, so she pins it in place. There are the pins at the center location. They are folded right in half. Now, once it's pinned in place, we can cut out the second half, and that completes the front plate of our backrest cushion. Remember the clips that we made on the opposite side for the pleats? Well, we need to duplicate them here on this side as well. So they're directly across from each other. So Cindy's looking for each one of the clips that she made and putting them on this new half. Now it's time to make the banding or the boxing for the sides of this back cushion. Now, matching up patterns for boxing on this kind of a cushion or back cushion is nearly impossible, so don't worry about that. Just make sure it's straight with the pattern as you pin it in place.
This piece is kind of stretched out of shape just from the wear and tear on the sofa, so I'm going to make sure that the stripes in the original piece follow the stripes in the new piece so that it's not cut way off grain. And I'll need to cut 2 of these opposite. So after I cut this first one, I'll turn it over and cut another one.
We drew an arrow on the old fabric. We'll transfer that arrow to the new fabric with our chalk pencil. Now we can unpin it. We need to make one more of these. So we're going to place it so outside surfaces are facing each other on another piece of fabric. And we're going to try to line up the stripes here and make sure that it's straight, just like we did with the other one. Then we'll pin it in place. This is a flat piece, so we only need to pin it a few locations. And then we'll cut around it, creating the second half for our center back cushion. The next piece we'll cut is a rectangular shaped piece. It creates the back frame of the back cushion. So we'll pin it in place, making sure that again its pattern is straight with the pattern of the new fabric on the bottom side.
So I also need to cut 2 of these, so I'm going to cut these 2 and then we'll start putting it back together. Here's you can see where I made the hash marks on these 2 pieces. These are the 2 pieces that need to go back together so that it looks like this after you stitch it.
These 2 rectangular strips form a portion of the back frame of our cushion. Here's a look back at our cushion before we disassembled it. You can see the yellow fabric, which is the back, and the frame around it, which we are now cutting apart here. This forms the frame for the back of our cushion.
So that's the first sewing I'm going to do, is put these 2 strips on.
We will take this over to the Sayrite Ultrafeed LS1 sewing machine and again sew a straight stitch a 1/2 inch from the raw edge of the fabric, securing this rectangular piece of fabric to the front plate. We'll do that on the left side and the right side. Be sure you do reversing at the beginning and the end to lock the stitch in place. Before we assemble the rest of this back cushion, we need to sew the pleats or tucks in place. That's what Cindy's going to do now.
Now I want to sew the tucks back in that were in this big piece, the center back, and it helps to have the old piece close by so you can make sure that you're getting everything in the right spot. So we had clips right here, so I'm going to fold that the same way that it was folded on this piece, like that, and follow the way all of these were folded as I go up the side of this piece.
By creating the tucks or the pleats now and sewing over them, we don't have to worry about doing it when we sew the other portion of the cushion together. So there's no need to do any reversing at the beginning and the end. These are just meant to hold it in place so we don't have to think about it when we're assembling the rest of this back cushion. You'll notice as well that the pleats are folded away from Cindy, in other words towards the bottom of the cushion. The cushion is facing so that the top is facing towards Cindy, and each one of the pleats are folded away from Cindy. So when you sew the opposite side, they too need to be folded in the same manner. When she sews the opposite side, she's going to flip the panel. So the tucks will be sewing towards Cindy there, but in the end, they are all sewn so that they are folded to the bottom of the pillow. Don't get confused just because she flips it.
So that's what makes the cushion have its shape. And I'll do the same thing on the other side.
Again, these pleats need to be folded so they're exactly the same as they were on the other side. So Cindy looks over there to make sure that they're same, folded down here. This stitch should be invisible when we're done sewing the adjacent panels next to it. So make sure this stitch is less than a ½ inch in the edge of the fabric. So if you really were to measure it, you'd notice that this stitch is about a ½ inch from the raw edge of the fabric. That way it'll be hidden when we create our ½ inch seam allowance when we sew the adjacent panels. Let's move on.
Okay, I'm going to mark at the bottom of this piece with a pin, and that is just there to show me where the bottom of this piece is, so that when I cut the next two pieces, the right side and the left side, I start at the same place so that my stripes match across on the cushions when they're installed on the sofa.
We'll be using that pin when it comes time to make our left and right cushions.
You can pin this together if it's easier to sew that way. And you can refer to your other pieces to, if you have a question about how to put this back together, you can refer to the two side pieces that you haven't taken apart yet.
Cindy is pinning this boxing or banding to the side of the back cushion. And she started at the end. Outside surfaces are facing each other, so when we turn it right side out, they will be the correct direction. If you prefer, you do not need to pin it. You can use double-sided tape if you like as well, 1/4 inch seam stick for canvas, or you can just take it to the sewing machine and start sewing. One nice thing about pinning or basting it in place prior to sewing is that you can be assured that the banding and the plate with its tucks or pleats are exactly the same in length. In other words, when you round this corner and you come to the other side, hopefully the opposite end will end up in the right spot. If it does not, you'll need to make modifications to your pleats because you may have made the pleats too large or too small. So what Cindy did there is she rounded the corners, she stopped and pinning it at that location, and then started at the opposite end. Outside surfaces are still facing each other. And hopefully when she's done, she'll find that there's no extra material in the middle position where she stopped pinning it. If there is, she'll need to make modifications to the pleats. Okay, we know this is dragging on, but we want to show this whole process because this might be a little bit confusing to some. Yep, as she comes close to that, you can see there's extra fabric in the banding or the boxing.
I may have taken my tucks too big.
So the pleats were folded too large.
Big, okay. Okay, we got these tucks just a little bit too big for the next piece to fit on. So I'm going to take them all apart and make them just a little bit smaller so that the next piece will fit on properly.
This can be avoided by paying attention to the old cushion and the size of the pleats. In other words, the fold that was created in them. They're typically always going to be the same size every pleat, usually in most situations. But if you actually study it and then sew them in, you probably won't have this issue. So Cindy's going to make those pleats that were a little bit too large a little bit smaller. And she probably will only need to do this at this one location, and that should give us enough fabric so that the banding or the boxing is the exact right length from end to end. So she cuts them down about 50% here. Now she'll repin the banding or the boxing to this again, and hopefully it'll come out right. We will not be showing that process since we already showed how to do that.
So I have this piece all pinned together, and this is what's going to make the shape of the cushion. You can see that there's the tucks right here. So this is the top of the cushion. And after we stitch it together, it'll have this rounded shape on the bottom.
There are a lot of pins. I don't quite understand why Cindy's not poking herself. Be careful. So now she takes it to the sewing machine and she sews a ½ inch from the raw edges that have been matched up and pinned in place. As she comes upon a pin, she'll pull it out. However, you could sew directly over your pins as well. Notice that she's sewing to the inside of that stitch that holds the pleats in place. In other words, it'll be invisible when the cushion is turned right side out. Skipping ahead a little bit here, we're coming to a corner. She sews over that pin, which is completely acceptable for a heavy-duty sewing machine like the Sayrite Ultrafeed LS1 sewing machine. And you'll notice when we get to this corner that her corner is not completely matched up with the panel underneath, and that's quite okay. It's a little bit off, but it won't be a big deal when the cushion is done. So don't be too alarmed at that if your corners are slightly off. They will still look great in the end. Let's skip ahead to about the end. Here we are about 2 inches away from the end of our sewing. Let's turn this right side out to show you what it looks like. This is just one side. We need to do the same on the other. Now we'll repeat the process for the other side, but this time we're not going to pin it and we're not going to baste it. Cindy is going to sew it blindly. She knows the pleats are the right size now. She made modifications. The other side fit. This side should fit as well.
Now we're ready to sew the same piece on the other side.
So she starts where she originally started pinning, and she just matches up the sides as she sews it together. This time the plate is on the underside and the banding or the boxing is on the top. This banding or boxing is not a rectangle. You can see it has shape. This is actually a little bit easier to tell what she did when she pinned the first panel in place. It didn't show it very well, but this shows it exactly what she's doing, because you can see the plate all splayed out underneath it. Here she's rounding a corner. We didn't get a very good shot of that, but she's basically matching up the edge of the fabric. Now at one point she has to turn the fabric a little bit more than the sewing machine can bear, so she lifts the presser foot with the needle buried and makes a clip in the fabric so it takes that corner better. Before she gets to the end, like a foot or two away, she checks to make sure that they are going to match up. And she notices here that the banding, or the boxing, in other words, that rectangular piece that has some shape to it, is too long. So notice what she's doing. She's pushing that fabric assembly into the presser foot. That shrinks it up. This is a good trick when you know that one panel is going to be longer or shorter than the other. You can sometimes pull a panel or push a panel in so it feeds faster than the other panel. And notice her right hand, she's actually working or pulling against it. So she's shrinking one and pulling one. That way when they come to the end, they'll be more even. I wish we had a little bit more film of that, but the cameraman stopped recording at that point. Sorry about that.
Okay, this is the bottom of our new cushion. These are the stretchers that we need to add on still. So these are the last 3 pieces that I need to cut for this cushion. We're going to reuse this piece and put it back on. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these 3 pieces.
Stretchers are sometimes referred to as fabric poles as well. These need to be made of the same fabric because some of the stretcher or fabric pole will be visible. Now here they do not have to be the exact size. They're basically just sewn onto the bottom edge, and then they are used to staple that cushion in place. So that's why the size isn't too important. You want it roughly the same, but it can be oversized. After the stretchers, the 3 of them are cut out, we will pin them together to create a frame. Here Cindy will explain it.
Okay, the next piece we need to put together is the stretchers for this center cushion. And I want this back like window piece to be the same size on the stretcher as it is on the cushion. So I've pinned these together the same distance from here to here, and I'm going to stitch this seam on the stretcher only, and then I'm going to apply it to the cushion.
Notice how outside surfaces are facing each other? That's important. For your information, we're sewing with the Sayrite Ultrafeed LS1 sewing machine, and it is set in the industrial tabletop with the Workhorse servo motor. The Workhorse servo motor gives it exceptional slow speed control and power. Upholstery fabric is a fairly easy fabric to sew and can be done with just about any sewing machine. But the walking foot of the Ultrafeed helps tremendously with feeding and pattern matching, as the walking foot pulls both the top and the bottom in more consistently than a standard foot. For more information about the Ultrafeed sewing machine or the industrial tabletop with the Reupholster servo motor, check it out at the Sayrite website. Remember earlier we talked about the fact that the stretcher size doesn't really matter. Here you can see it's a little bit long, but that doesn't matter. What matters is, does it fit the frame of the cushion itself?
Okay, you can see that we kind of have a window on the back of the cushion, and we also have a window on the stretchers. So I'm going to lay the two of them together, right sides together, and match up these bottom corners. And put in a few pins and stitch along this edge, the bottom edge, and then back up this side.
Here a corner has been reached. Watch what Cindy does here. She sews past the corner by about a ½ inch, stops, buries the needle, lifts the presser foot, rolls the fabric assembly around, lowers the presser foot, and then continues to sew down the opposite direction. So this is a 90-degree turn. Let's move on.
Okay, so here's our cushion all put together except for this back panel. This is the bottom and these are the two sides. So I'm going to turn it over. And I'm going to sew this back panel on a little differently than it was originally. It's a little bit easier to sew it with this seam on the outside. And it won't show, so it really doesn't matter. So I'm going to put a few pins in it, and I'm going to go around on the same stitching that I just did to sew this piece on.
So Cindy will pin this all around the perimeter, basically right where she sewed the previous stitching for those stretchers. Let's move ahead to sewing it. So that back panel, or yellow panel, is going to be facing the tabletop, and everything else is on top of it. She will sew right where she previously sewed those stretchers in place, doing some reversing at the beginning and the end. Let's move ahead to where she reaches the corner. So here she's reached the corner, and she cuts a snip in the fabric, the decorative fabric that is, so that it can go around the corner and be relaxed a little bit there. The needle is buried about a ½ inch away from the corner, the presser foot lifted, the fabric turned, and splayed out flat, presser foot lowered, and then continue to sew. We're going to skip ahead here, but basically when we come to the top edge, we will leave that edge open. So here we are coming to the top edge. So we've sewn everywhere that we've sewed those stretchers in place, and we'll do some reversing here. That leaves the top edge open so we can put stuffing in it.
You can see that these cushions need a little bit of batting added to them, so before we stuff them, we're going to use this flat batting and wrap this cushion with it.
So basically this flat batting that is comprised of basically a sheet batting that we talked about earlier is cut to form kind of like a taco over top of what we currently have. So it's slightly larger in width. She folds the other half over that stuffing, and the portion that creates the fold is the bottom of the stuffing. So she trims the edges here so they are not too large, the corners I should say. Now if you'd like, you can use a spray glue like 3M77 or foam lock and open up the taco shell and spray the inside to that taco shell surface. We're going to call it a taco shell, and that'll keep things from moving around. We did not do that. You may want to do that if you have the spray glue. And then we start inserting it into the cushion with the folded edge going down first. The open edge is the top edge. We're going to show this in double time. You want to keep inserting your hand inside of the cushion to the corners so that you can fill out the corners well. Make sure there are no wrinkles or folds in that batting you just placed over the stuffing, in other words the taco shell. That's why you may want to glue it prior to inserting it in the cushion cover.
I'm going to use the hand stapler to attach this together at the back. You can sew it on the machine if you like.
Why are we stapling it instead of sewing it? Well, in the end, this cushion will be stapled onto the frame of the sofa, and we will use the pneumatic stapler to do that. In fact, it'll probably be stapled more than once with the back panel as well. So in the end, it'll be as secure as sewing. But if you choose to sew it, you can do that instead of this temporary stapling that holds everything in place. It's up to you. Let's now take that center back cushion that we just made and staple it to the sofa. That's next.
We have our back piece, our center back piece ready to apply to the sofa, so I'm going to mark the center of this piece. And it's right where this cut is already, so I'm not going to worry about marking it again. And then I'm going to go to the back of the sofa and measure the back and mark the center on the back also. Now we can match up this center mark here with the center mark here and get this center cushion in place.
At this time, we're going to just place some staples at the center location and every few inches apart. This does not permanently staple it in place, but we can get the overall appearance. And if we're not happy, we can remove the staples since we aren't putting a ton of them in yet. We eventually will, but not yet.
I will go back and put more staples up here, but I want to pull this and see what it looks like before I put too many staples in it.
Now Cindy will go around to the front and check to see how everything is laying. If she's happy, she will continue sewing. If not, she will pull staples and readjust. She is happy. Let's continue stapling. We'll check again to make sure everything still looks good, and it does.
This is the right side facing cushion, and we're ready to take this one apart. It's going to come apart the same as the center did. The only difference is there's an angle on the side, so when you do these, make sure you get a right and a left. And there's no stretcher in the center of this one, but there's a stretcher on the side and the bottom.
So the principle for this is basically the same as it was for that center cushion we just did, except for obviously there's a little bit of a different shape to this, and there's obviously only 2 stretchers instead of 3. So what should we do here? Should we show the whole process? I think what we're going to do instead is kind of show this in quick time. So we're going to go over this rather quickly. When making the left and the right back cushion, we need to make sure that the pattern matches the center cushion. When we pattern the center cushion, we placed a pin in the fabric. Here, Cindy will explain it.
Okay, I'm going to mark at the bottom of this piece with a pin, and that is just there to show me where the bottom of this piece is, so that when I cut the next 2 pieces, the right side and the left side, I start at the same place, so that my stripes match across on the cushions when they're installed on the sofa.
That was a clip taken when we were patterning the center back cushion.
This is the pin that we put in earlier to mark where we want the bottom of this cushion to lay. It's the same place as the bottom of the center cushion, so the stripes match up going across the sofa. So I'm just going to kind of flatten this out the best I can. We can't fold this one in half like I did the center because of this angle right here. So we can cut this one flat like this and then turn it over to get the left side.
We'll show this in double time. You can see here that the fabric does not lay flat. That's because it's been used quite a bit and it is stretched. Just try to get it to lay as flat as possible, and don't expect to get all of the misshape out of it.
This fabric here is stretched from wear and tear on the sofa. I'm not going to worry about flattening that all out as long as my lines look fairly straight, and it's straight up here, and I know it's straight down here by the stripe in the fabric. So I'm going to leave it like that and cut this one. Before I take this pattern off of here, I want to mark my where the little folds were again, like I did on the first piece.
These folds, or tuck, or pleat, is exactly like what was done on the center cushion. She's marking the location for each one of them.
Now for the left and the right back, I can just turn these pieces over and cut identical pieces going the opposite direction. I don't have to take that other back all apart to do this. And I want to make sure that I line the stripe up going across this way.
Then the location of each pleat is marked as well by cutting no deeper than 1/4 inch into the fabric, because we do not want this slit to go deeper than our seam allowance of 1/2 inch. Do that on both sides.
Now I can cut all of these smaller pieces and do the same thing, cut one and turn it over and cut the other side identical to it, and then I'll have my left and my rights all cut.
you'll notice that she will duplicate this piece, but usually duplication means that you flip one so that outside surfaces are facing each other. This one is not done that way because you actually need 2 per cushion, and we have 2 cushions to make. So she's making this for the opposite side. It does not need to be flipped. Here Cindy will explain a little bit more in detail right now.
Okay, these 2 side pieces that I'm cutting, I checked and made sure that they were the same on both sides of the cushion. We do have an angle to go around the arm on these sofas, so the left and the right side are different. But on this particular sofa, both of these are the same. So I need 4 of these, 1 here, 1 here, and 1 on each side of the other piece. And they happen to be the same.
So now those 2 curvy pieces, or boxing pieces, or strapping pieces, are flipped so outside surfaces are facing each other. They'll be pinned in place, and then we'll cut around them. We will not show cutting these out. Let's move on. These are the 2 stretchers or fabric poles. We'll pin that to the fabric and cut those out as well. We will not show that.
Okay, these 2 pieces are the stretcher that goes right here and right here on the side of the cushion. So one of them will get attached down here, and the other one gets attached down here, and then it will take the shape of the roundness of the cushion. These are not the same, so I have to cut 2 of this one and 2 of this one in order for it to work, and they need to be opposite of each other.
To be opposite of each other means that we'll take those new fabric pieces that we just cut and lay them so that outside surfaces are facing each other. And we try to match up the pattern as much as possible so the pattern's the same. Not that it'll match up with the top of the cushion, because it will not. Now we take the front of this cushion and we'll sew the pleats in place, just like we did earlier on the center cushion. Same process. Make sure you fold them so they are like the old cushion, and so they are folded all in the same direction. This time Cindy's folding them so they are facing her. On the other side, if she flips the panel, she will fold them so they face away from her. Depends on which way she flips the panel. And now the stretchers are sewn in place. Outside surfaces are facing each other.
This piece here that we cut it will make the shape of the cushion. The cushion will go around this. So we're going to pin it all together so that it ends up kind of like this. Down one side and back up the other.
A slit going no deeper than 1/4 inch is placed at the corner to help the fabric to relax to take the curve. Or take the 90-degree corner, I should say.
You can see that this little piece is a little bit bigger than this piece here. If I put this on the bottom as I sew, the feed dogs will ease that in and there won't be a tuck there. So I'm going to put it on the bottom.
Very nice indeed. Let's turn it right side out so you can see what it looks like on this one side. Gorgeous. Good job, Cindy. Now we'll just repeat that procedure for the other side. We're going to show this in double time as well. So we're first going to pin it just like we did on the opposite side. This clip going no deeper than a ½ inch will allow the fabric to take the turn.
Okay. This is where I'm starting to sew, is up here at it's actually the top of the cushion, and then I'm going around and I'll end up here when I come back, so that those seams are right next to each other when we're done. And this top area should be fairly level, because this is going to turn around to the back, and this is what's going to make the shape of the cushion, this little piece right here.
That's perfect, yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to skip ahead here. Sewing around the perimeter is done exactly like we did the first time, so let's move on. Here we are coming to the last few inches. Do some reversing, and now it's sewn in place.
We're ready to cut the stretchers around this little window that we made in the back, and the two side pieces don't have a stretcher on this side. They just have the bottom and the outside edge. So I need to cut these two.
This may seem very confusing, but it won't if you have your old cushion to follow. That's why we recommend you take some photos, and you still have the one half that we don't even take apart, so you can use that as a guide when you're assembling your cushion. So even though it may look confusing here, it won't, because you actually have the original to look at. These are stretchers or fabric pulls, so the size is not too important. You just need to make sure that they're at least the size of the old one. Being a little bit too big is no problem whatsoever. If the old upholstered panels have slits and cutouts, don't put them in yet. We'll do that when we put it on the frame.
And I also need 2 of each of these. So I'm just going to turn it over and cut my next one. This little stretcher on the outside of this piece, I'm going to cut it off and use it again. You'll need it to pull the fabric tight around the arm, the outside arm of the sofa.
In the end, I don't think we used this stretcher, but it's always wise to reinstall it, especially if the manufacturer did.
And I'm going to pin it right here so I get it sewn back in that same spot.
We'll do the same for the second stretcher, making 2, one for the left side and one for the right side.
So first I'm going to put together this seam down here at the bottom and attach these 2 pieces that I just cut. And then I'll sew all these stretchers on where they go, and then I can apply it to the cushion itself.
These stretchers that are a totally different fabric do not need to be sewn on in a particular manner. They are only used to pull the fabric tight in position, so you don't have to have them exactly lined up. You just need to have them secured to the decorative fabric.
Now I can apply this to the cushion on the back. And I'm just going to match up this corner and go across the bottom with a few pins.
And then up the side with a few pins.
And then I'm going to sew across here and across here.
Now we'll take that old fabric that we're going to reuse, that was on the back on the left cushion and the right cushion, and we're going to pin it in place just like we did on the center cushion. We're not going to show all this because the process is the same.
So the last step on this cushion is to sew around these three sides, and then we're ready to stuff this one.
A clip at the corner helps the fabric to take the turn, as we discussed many times before. We'll leave the top edge open so that we can stuff our stuffing inside of it. The stuffing is inserted in the exact same way that it was done when we did the center cushion. We will not show that. Next, we'll show you how to staple the back cushions on the left and right side. Position the cushion to the left or the right, whichever one you want to start with, and then we will staple at the top once it's in position. Again, we will not staple it permanently in place. We'll staple it in 3 or 4 places until we're satisfied with its position, just like we did with the cinder cushion. Cindy's checking to make sure the stripes line up, and they do. Now she feeds the stretcher through the frame. There's a small opening in this sofa to allow that fabric to come through. Once the stretcher is pulled through, it'll eventually need to be slit in certain spots to work its way around obstacles, but we'll not do that yet. First, we want to position everything and make sure that we're happy with the way that the cushion's going to go on to the sofa here. So continue checking, making sure that everything lays nice and flat. After you're satisfied, then we'll start to staple, and then we'll start to slit, if required, stretchers to get around obstacles. That looks good. Now take a look at this. You see the fabric at the bottom, the stripes don't line up? Who cares? No one's ever going to see that. That's where a cushion will be placed. So it has been secured at a few locations, not secured well, but here Cindy has determined that this stretcher will have to be slit to work around an obstacle here. So she used her scissors and cut a slit in it, and now she'll try to fit it around that obstacle. If there are too many wrinkles, she'll cut the slit deeper. Cindy's happy with that. Now she'll move back to the top and check it out. I don't believe we need to create a slit here. The fabric poles were put on in 2 different pieces here, so they actually work around the frame fairly well because they were sewn on in 2 different sections. So no slit is required here. Now we don't want to staple that edge of the cushion. And Cindy will talk about that a little bit later on, so she leaves that unstapled here. She's now going to move to the side where the stretcher is coming through the opening in the furniture at the back, and she'll pull it taut and staple it to the frame. We still have not attached that corner yet, but we want to secure the rest of the cushion in place by adding more staples. Now Cindy will talk about that corner.
I'm going to leave this corner open for now until we put this inside arm on and see what happens right here, so that we can get it so that it looks nice and smooth with the arm at the same time.
The left cushion needs to be installed in the same manner. We will not show that. Next, we're going to do patterning and installing the inside arm.
I'm going to put the old arm back in place, close to where it was before, so that I can mark where the stripe falls on the arm and get it matched the best that I can. I'm going to put a pin in this green stripe, and then I'm going to put a pin in the corresponding area on the arm so that this green stripe will continue across here. So there's my pin on this green stripe that we marked on the back of the sofa.
Cindy pushes the pin not only through the old fabric, but through the new fabric on the underside as well. Then she'll position the fabric so it's laying as flat as possible on the new fabric.
Okay, you can pin this down if you want to, but it's pretty much just a big rectangle piece, and we're going to shape it as we put it on, so you can cut just a big rectangle for this one. And don't cut these cuts into it yet. We'll cut those as we put it onto the sofa.
There's no sewing here, so again, that's why we're cutting it into a big rectangle piece. We're going to position it on the sofa and staple it in place, and then we will cut the slits in as we are stapling it in place, the slits to allow the obstacles to go through.
And I'm marking the top of this one. And then I'm going to turn it over and cut another one for the other side.
So to cut the other side of the inside arm, she flips it so outside surfaces are facing each other. She'll match up the stripes, and she'll cut a same size piece for that as well.
Okay, I'm going to roughly measure this arm so we can cover it with the batting and smooth out all of this lumpy batting that's here. And I need it to go all the way to the back and up and around the top of the arm. So that's about 40 by 24.
Cindy moves the pin a little bit back on that same stripe just so that it doesn't get caught on the batting that she's using to smooth out that arm. We want to staple it at a few locations just to position it. We do not have to staple this down securely, just enough so that it doesn't move when the fabric is patterned over the top. Here at the obstacle, she has to cut a slit so that the batting will wrap around the front rail. We're going to show this in double time. It's pretty easy. We just staple it around. We do have to cut a few slits at a few different locations. You'll notice the batting doesn't come all the way down to the leg of the sofa. That's okay. However, you may choose to go down a little bit further than what Cindy does here. It still looks good in the end. Here at the back cushion, she's sticking her arm inside, and then she pulls out the batting and determines where the batting has to go around an obstacle, so she creates a slit. Basically, it has to be fit around the frame, so that slit allows it to take the shape and lay flat. So then she stuffs the batting inside and cuts away any excess, continues to stuff it in. Down here, no one will see this. This is going to be hidden by the frame and also the seat cushion. And she pulls the end of the batting through the frame at the back corner. Now our arm has a very smooth surface indeed.
Okay, we're ready to apply this arm to the sofa, and we want this stripe to match going at least here in the corner, because this is going to kind of go down to follow the arm. So it's a process of putting it in place and standing back and looking at it, making sure that it reaches all the way to the back here and all the way around the front up here. This right here is the green line that we were using to match on this, and it's going to follow the shape of the arm going this way. But right here is where I want to make sure that it matches.
So Cindy's making sure the stripe lines up, and the stripe at the top of the arm is nice and straight, and there's plenty of excess fabric all around.
And then I'll put a few staples in and around the arm, and then I'll start cutting my cuts.
These staples are just to hold it in place as she continues to work with the fabric. So she is not stapling it permanently in place, she's stapling it with a few primary staples to keep everything aligned the way that she wants. A staple at the back here will keep that stripe at the top of the arm perfectly straight. Does it still line up with the stripe on the back cushion? It does. This is too much fabric to fold up. So instead of folding it to create a hem, she's going to trim some of it away.
Yeah, that's too much.
At this bottom edge, Cindy decides to create a single hem. She folds the fabric under. That does not necessarily need to be done, but it does get rid of the excess fabric. You could staple it without the the single hem, and then trim away the excess. It's your choice. Now she starts to work on that slit to allow the fabric to go around the front rail. It should be made all the way to the arm, but we want to do this gradually. So notice she stops cutting and she's checking to make sure that the slit doesn't go too deep. It typically will not. You'll have to create a few slits in this until you're satisfied with the way the fabric rests on the arm and rests around that front rail. So keep checking. Don't cut too deep. If you do, then you'll have a large slit there that you'll have to either just hide, or you'll either have to replace the fabric. So you want to do this gradually. We're going to show the rest of this in double time. Cindy wraps the fabric around the front of the arm and puts a solitary staple in place. Now she can see exactly what the fabric will look like, and she knows even more how much she needs to slit away to make that fabric go around the front rail here. You can see there's still a large wrinkle in here, so she continues to slit the fabric in 2 locations to work around that front rail. When that wrinkle at the front of the arm disappears, then she's slit it enough. And that actually looks really good. So that's a perfect slit working around that front rail. That looks awesome. And the fabric at the top of the rail is folded under, so there's a hem there. Even better.
I'm going to leave this part free right now. There's a metal tack strip that needs to go down along here that'll tuck this underneath here. And we can't tack this down over here until we put that metal tack strip in. So I'm going to go around and finish the rest of the arm first.
Where she's stapling here at the bottom edge of the inside of the arm, the frame will actually be fastened to that board there, the sleeper sofa frame. So no one's going to see that at all. But we definitely want to staple with the fabric pulled nice and taut. So it is important to pull the fabric taut and staple it at this location at several spots. When stapling this arm on, you want to be sure that you don't pull the fabric so much that the stripes become wiggly or warped. Try to keep them nice and straight. Now here at the top near the backrest, the fabric has to be pulled through the frame. And if you remember the old fabric, it had some slits in it that we had not put in yet. Here, Cindy is creating a slit in the fabric so it can be wrapped around the frame. And that just needs to be done by feel. You need to feel where the frame is and pull the fabric up and create the slit where it's required. Now the fabric can be wrapped around the frame and pulled through portions of the frame so that it can still be pulled taut. On the inside here, near that back cushion, she has to work around the frame there as well. So again, another slit needs to be made in the fabric. Typically slits are made along the frame or obstacle and all the way to the obstacle. So the slit needs to go almost to the point where it reaches the obstacle. Then you want to stop cutting. More slitting needs to be done here. She's almost to the obstacle, so now this fabric should be able to wrap around the obstacle without causing wrinkles anywhere else. A couple more slits. This is an area where no one will see it again. So now can she pull it through the frame? Yes, she can. She's pulling it through the frame structure to the back edge.
You can see here why I left this edge of this outside cushion free, because this arm piece needs to tuck underneath it.
If you had accidentally stapled on that back cushion at this corner, no big deal. You simply pull the staples and then push that fabric underneath and then reinstall your staples. So don't worry. If you staple someplace where you shouldn't have and you realize that fabric needs to go under something else, you can pull the staples and redo it.
Now I can finish this back piece of the cushion.
Wow, that looks awesome. At corners, just work with the fabric until you get a nice pleasing look. You'll have to obviously create a few tucks in the fabric. Does the tuck look good to you? If it does, staple it in place. If you'd like to make modifications to the tuck to make it look different, feel free. Whatever looks good, that's your goal. Excellent. It's now stapled mainly in place everywhere. Let's go to the front of the arm. Here we're going to try to achieve what we think looks best.
The top of the arm needs folds in it to go around this corner, and the folds are kind of a personal preference. You can look at the old one and see how they did it originally, or you can fold it the way that it works best with your fabric. It's kind of a trial and error thing, so you may have to take out a few staples as you're doing this.
Here she finds a staple that will not allow her to fold the fabric at that front arm the way that she wants, so she removes it. That looks pretty good, almost like the old sofa. I think we're happy with it.
Okay. We're ready to put this metal tack strip along this edge right here, and I'm going to mark it right about here.
The metal tack strips cut easily with wire cutters. Just bend them until they break.
And you put it back behind your fabric and poke the prongs through. These are really sharp, so be careful.
Once it is through, then the fabric is rolled under. And now you have a nice crisp edge. Here we're using a rubber mallet, but that doesn't work as well as the mallet that's available from Sailrite. Here is a rawhead mallet, and it is a much firmer blow and is still very gentle to the fabric. We recommend, if you're going to do upholstery like this, that you purchase it at Sailrite. With that said, can it be done with that rubber mallet? Yes, it could. So the tack strip creates a beautiful edge that looks completely finished. Now we can continue to staple it down to the bottom of the leg. When you are stapling, be cognitive of the panel that will overlay that side arm. You do not want a staple to be accidentally placed outside of the panel that will cover the outside arm of the chair. If you do, you'll just have to remove it later. It typically doesn't damage the fabric, so don't worry about it, but try to make sure those staples are placed well within that side panel when you do it. You'll want to follow the same procedure for the arm on the other side. We will not show that. Let's move on. Next, we'll pattern and install the outside arm cover.
We're ready to cut the outside arm, so I'm going to kind of hold that in place where it was before and mark one of these stripes so I can match right here to the outside arm piece. So I'm going to put a pin in that green stripe and a pin right here so I can follow that green stripe all the way around the outside. So here's the green stripe that I marked on the fabric that's already on the sofa.
Don't worry about trimming right up to the edge of the fabric. Again, this piece is going to be stapled in place. No sewing is required, so it can be a little bit oversized without any issues.
I'm going to put a pin in the green stripe so when I take it back to the sofa, I know which stripe to match. And you can flip this over and cut the other side at the same time before you apply this one to the sofa.
Just make sure the stripes are lined up so they are exactly the same. Outside surfaces are facing each other.
I need a piece of cardboard tack strip that goes from this corner out to this end, so I'm going to cut that before I get started.
This cardboard tack strip available from Sayrite creates a nice crisp edge as the fabric will be folded upon its top edge.
So I want to do my best to match up my green stripe going around. Make sure that I leave enough fabric here to tuck under and that I have enough fabric back here to come around the corner before I start stapling this.
The top edge will have the cardboard tack strip and the front edge will have a metal tack strip, the one with the sharp prongs. Cindy folds the top edge to match where she's going to place it on the furniture so that she can line up that stripe with the front of the arm. When she's happy with its location and where it will eventually be stapled on, she'll lift the fabric back and place a staple very close to that folded, hemmed edge. But before she places a staple in, she will place her cardboard tack strip over top of that point. So it'll fold right at the top edge of that cardboard tack strip. Apply or staple it only a few times because you need to check to make sure it's in the right position before you go ahead and just staple it in place. So here she's going to fold it all the way to the back, and she's going to make sure that it's exactly where she wants it, and to make sure that the green stripe is lined up. If it's not, you'll need to make modifications before you staple the remainder in place at the top edge. The stripes need to match the front of the arm, but they also need to be horizontal going back at this edge. So if they were crooked, they'd look a little bit odd.
After I have a few staples in this, I'm going to check this again at the side. And it looks like my stripe is just a little bit high, so I'm going to take those few staples out and move it down a little bit so I get a better match coming across this way.
Much better. Staple a few and check. Staple a few and check. Until you're happy, don't staple it in totally secure yet.
I'm going to take out these 3 staples right here because they're up above my cardboard strip and pull them down underneath so that you can't see them after I put the cardboard strip on. I'll just staple them down a little bit farther.
That's what we were talking about before. When you're stapling applications like this, you want to be cognitive of where the second panel will overlay because you have to hide those staples. So you want to make sure that you staple far enough down that they do not show up when the adjacent panel is placed in. If they do, you'll need to remove them. But as you can see, removing them does not damage the fabric. Though you can see a little bit of holes there, if you rub your finger over it, they'll disappear completely with this type of fabric.
Now after you get this in place where you're happy with it, you can go across and staple it all the way. Now we're ready to put this piece back on that was holding the batting in place for the arm.
This is the scrap piece that we removed. It will provide support or a foundation for the batting. Now we're just going to use that soft batting that was in here again. We're going to repurpose it and staple it at a few locations to secure it. You could use the sheet batting that we used earlier in place of this, but this works well.
I'm going to trim this extra batting off that comes around the back so that we get a nice smooth line around the back corner here when we staple it down. Okay, I'm going to put a few staples around the back corner, and then I'm going to go around and do the front, and then I'll finish stapling it all down.
Now we move to the front edge of the outside arm cover. She notices that there are a few staples that may be left exposed here on the front of the arm, so she removes those staples. Here on this edge that she folded back, a metal tack strip will be applied. This will give it a nice crisp front edge that looks finished. Now those staples are well within this panel, so they will not be visible when the tack strip is installed. Okay, we're going to show in normal time the installation of the tack strip. So she folds the fabric back to where she wants the fabric to end along that front edge. So this is where the tack strip needs to be pushed into the fabric. Notice the top is folded under. So she pushes the tack strip in on that folded edge that she created. And she'll work each one of the prongs into the fabric so that there are no puckers in the fabric. If the metal tack strip is too long, you can use wire cutters and basically bend it back and forth until it breaks to the length that you need. We showed that earlier. Now that the tack strip is on that edge and it's a nice crisp edge, she works with pulling the fabric nice and taut and creating a beautiful 90-degree corner at the top here. So she's going to tuck the fabric back until it looks nice, and then she pulls it taut and make sure that her stripes are lined up as they should be, pushing back any polyester batting that may be sticking out. And this one is a little bit off, so she's going to re-poke that prong through the material because it wasn't nice and crisp. The fold wasn't down there. Now it is. So pull it taut and then slightly push on it. You won't be able to push those prongs into the wood. You'll have to hammer it in, but you definitely want to have it in the right position before you start hammering. Again, we're using the rawhide upholstery mallet that's available from Sailrite. You could use another mallet if you'd like, just one that doesn't damage the fabric. So if you don't have this and you don't want to spend the extra money, don't let that stop you from doing your own upholstery project. Now we just need to fasten the rest of it. Here at the bottom edge, she creates a hem, or tucks the fabric back twice, I believe, there. Not that it's required, but she's just trying to get rid of excess fabric so she doesn't have to cut it all away. And you want to staple it everywhere, securing it well in place. So drawing the fabric taut and stapling it anywhere that there is not a staple, approximately an inch apart. And there's what she looks like when she's done. The lines look nice and straight, and that matches up with the front of the arm. That's perfect. Now we need to do the same thing to the other side. We will not show that. Next up, patterning, sewing, and installing the outside back.
I'm ready to put the outside back on the sofa, so I'm going to hold this up where it will go when the new piece is applied.
Cindy's trying to pin it, but she's running into the wood, so the pin bends. That didn't work too well.
And mark one of my stripes so I can line this stripe up around to the back. So you can see we put a 1 on this one when we started. This was our first piece we took off, and it's the last piece we're going to put back on. When they constructed this piece, they put several seams in it. I'm going to lay this on the center of my yardage and only put a piece on each side and balance those seams. We really don't need all of these seams in here. They may have done it to use up fabric, I don't know. But I need to put this pin on the green line that I marked on the sofa also. So there's the center of the fabric. So I'm going to pull my piece over to where I put my pin in the center. Fold this back and make sure that I have my green pin in the right place. Green stripe pin. Here's the green that I marked on the sofa. On the sofa it has this small white line above and the large white line below. So this is the green I want to use instead of this one with the large above and the small below. So I'm going to pull this out so I have my pin in the center lined up with the fold of my fabric. This piece doesn't have to be perfect. Give yourself some extra to work with. Now if I leave this piece in the center where I cut it, I can measure out that I'm going to need to add about 16 inches to each side of this piece. But I also want to match up my stripe on this one.
So how much fabric will it take to do a sofa like this? Well, at the Sayrite website, if you find the Sayrite fabric calculator, and if you click on upholstery projects in that calculator, it will give you the approximate yardage per each type of sofa or chair. Check it out. It's at the Sayrite website. You will have already probably noticed that when your fabric has a stripe or a pattern that you have to match up, that you do waste a little bit more fabric. In fact, the fabric calculator says to add about 15% more fabric if you have a pattern that needs matched.
So this one will match up with this side, and I'll cut another one just like this to go on the other side of the selvage.
To sew pieces together, she sews about a ½ inch from the raw edge of the fabric. Or in this situation, since there's a selvage edge, she's just being sure that she sews into the good fabric because it's more than a ½ inch from the raw edge. No reason to do a top stitch, and you want to make sure that the pattern matches when it's unfolded. She'll do the same to the other end, sewing on the 16-inch piece for our situation. Let's move on.
So you can see here, this is the green line that we matched up with our pin on this side. I really want to start in the center over here. So I'm going to look here and see where my fold needs to be at the top, and it's right at the bottom of that darker mossy green color. So I'm going to come to the center, find the center of my back, which is right here at this clip, and the center of my fabric, which is right here at this pin. Or you can fold your fabric in half and mark the center this way also. Be a little bit easier with a clip. So here's the green line I was looking at when I was over there at the corner. So I'm just going to put a few staples in this all the way across and then fold it back over towards me and see if I have it in the right spot. And I can still adjust it if I need to. So it looks like I need to move it up just a little bit higher to get this stripe to go smoothly around the corner. I also want to make sure when I put this on that none of these staples are showing after I put this on.
Since there are only a few staples that are above our back panel, we only need to remove a few. But if you had to remove more than that, you may want to consider making that hem a little bit smaller. Doing that would basically move this top edge up slightly and hopefully hide those staples that may come outside of this back panel. So the choice is yours. Remove the staples if there are only a few, or make the hem smaller, moving the panel up. So now Cindy adjusts the fabric so that the stripe lines up. I believe she has moved the fabric up slightly. Yep. Again, the cardboard tack strip will make a crisp fold at the top edge of this sofa back panel. So now let's fold that edge and see if its stripes line up with the side arm stripes. Yep, they do.
Better. Okay.
And now that we know exactly where this panel needs to rest, we can position it, the tack strip that is, along the top edge and start stapling it more permanently in place. There are definitely not enough staples in this tack strip. You should have a staple at least every inch or so, but we can do that later on. We're first checking to make sure the stripes line up here as well, on the opposite side.
So I have this matched on both sides and in place on the top where I want it to be, so I can go back across and put more staples all the way across this tack strip.
Okay, the top edge is secured. Don't move on to the sides. We're going to move on to the bottom edge.
Okay, next is to pull it down underneath. Now I'm ready to pull down the bottom edge of this, and after I get this in place, then I'll do the sides with the metal tack strips.
Notice that the sofa has been laid on its front, and we have that upholstered table that's supporting it at the center position.
I'm just going to put a few staples in this because I can come back and adjust it after I get the metal tack strips in if I need to tighten it up a bit.
Sayrite has a video showing how to make that upholstery table that the sofa is resting on now. It's very convenient for upholstery jobs like this. If you'd like to see that video, check out the description. There'll be a link there.
We don't need this much fabric over the side of this, so I'm going to trim a little bit of this off. And I can measure my tack strip from the bottom to the top, and I'm just going to take off one of these prongs.
Since we've already shown the process of installing these tack strips, we're going to show it in double time here.
When you have it in place and it looks like it's snug the way that you want it, you can start to tap it down. Then that edge is finished and we can finish off this part right here with the staple gun. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to trim off some of this excess fabric so it doesn't get in my way. And cut one prong off of my tack strip. Fold the fabric back so it's snug. This is the last chance you have to snug it up across the back. This is where you need to check and make sure you have it snug. You can tug on this a little bit, or you can move your tack strip over a little to make it tighter across the back. I think I'm going to be good with the way this is right now and go ahead and start tacking it down.
That looks awesome. Trim away some of the excess at the bottom edge and make sure you've applied enough staples in the bottom edge. Let's move on. The sofa cushions vary in style, so let's go over the type of cushion that we will be sewing up. Here's Cindy to explain our cushion design.
So there's no cording or anything. These tucks right here will shape the cushions. The band goes all the way around the side, the back, and then over on the other side. So it's a fairly simple cushion to make. You can see all 3 cushions are the same size, so I only need to take one apart to make all 3 of them.
Since the fabric we're upholstering with has a stripe, we need to match the cushion up to the sofa's stripe.
Okay. In order to get this cushion, the stripe going across the cushion the best that we can on this, I'm going to hold the cushion up where it's going to go and mark a stripe. Maybe this yellow one. And kind of eyeball it into the same place on my cushion. It may not be perfect, but it should be close.
Now we can remove the stitching holding the cushion together. This is a tedious task. Here we're using thread nippers, and here we're using scissors. You can also use a seam ripper. And notice that Cindy is being careful not to cut the fabric, but only the threads that is sewing the fabric panels together. Our foam is still in great shape, so we're going to reuse it. But if you need foam, Sayrite carries it.
This fabric has been seamed to make this cushion long enough. We won't need to do that because our pattern is going to lay up the roll in our, so we don't need to add this piece on. We can cut it all in one piece. So I'm not going to take these pieces off of the ends of the cushion. So I have my pin right here on the yellow stripe that I marked the corresponding stripe on the sofa. So I'm just going to put a few pins in this and then cut it.
She will fold the fabric back in half so that she only has to pattern half at a time. Then when she cuts out the new fabric, she'll fold it up and pattern the second half. Watch.
I'm going to fold this in half this way and put a pin or a couple pins up here at the halfway point, and then I can cut out this half of it and then fold it on itself to cut out the rest of it.
These 2 pins at the top are placed in the new fabric, not the old fabric. Now we'll use scissors and cut along the edge of the old fabric, cutting out our new fabric. We need to make sure that any seam allowance, it's usually a ½ inch or so, is folded back, so we're cutting along the raw edge of the old fabric to make our new fabric.
And before I take the piece off to fold it up in half, I'm going to mark these 2 little tucks in the side of the cushion.
When creating notches like this with scissors, don't go deeper than about a ½ inch into the fabric, so we don't go into the seam allowance.
On both sides.
Here's a look back at our cushion. These tucks, or pleats, give the front of the cushion shape. And here Cindy is cutting into the opposite side at each one of those tucks. Now the multi-use pins can be removed, except for don't remove the multi-use pins that indicate where the halfway point is on the new fabric. This can be set aside, and we'll pull our fabric down. Those 2 pins at the top are still there. Cindy will fold the fabric back on top of itself so outside surfaces are facing each other, and she will make sure that those 2 pins in the middle position are right on the fold that she's creating now. And she'll also make sure that her stripes are horizontal. They won't match up to the stripes on the underside, but they should be straight across. Then she'll pin it in place. Since this fabric is rather flat, we only need to pin it at the 4 corners. We did not show it, but we also made the clips in this side to match the top.
Make sure you cut your clips on the other side also after you fold it and cut it. Now the zipper is made in 3 pieces with the zipper in the middle and a band on each side. I'm going to take this apart so that I can construct the zipper.
Again, Cindy will not cut the fabric, but rather the stitching, holding these pieces together.
So I'll need to cut 2 of these for each cushion, and I'm going to add a few inches, maybe 3 inches to mine so that it folds over on the ends of the zipper, and then you don't have so much stress when you're stuffing the cushion on the ends of the zipper.
Here's a look ahead at the finished cushion. You'll notice the zipper tucks into a pocket. That's what Cindy is referring to when she's saying she's going to add 3 extra inches to this banding or boxing, so that the 3 inches will create a pocket for the end of the zipper to tuck into. She'll pin this in place with multi-use pins and then cut around the perimeter with scissors. No reason to use a hot knife. There will be a 1/2-inch seam allowance added to this, so we don't have to worry about unraveling. Typically, when cushions are made, we don't have to worry about matching up the pattern. It's almost impossible to do so. But we do have to ensure that the panel that we're patterning is laying horizontal to the stripes or the pattern.
So I can use this one to cut all the rest of them, and I'll need 6 of these.
We're making 3 cushions. We only need 2 of these per each cushion. So that's what she's referring to when she says 6 of them. She's going to use this one she just cut out to make the second one for the opposite side of this cushion.
So there's the 2 bands, and then I'm going to make a zipper to go in the center of these 2 pieces. I'm not going to take the zipper apart to make the new one. I'm going to just measure it. So it is 31 inches long. And there'll be 2 pieces that are 4 inches. This part is 3 inches, and I'm going to add an inch to tuck under to stitch the zipper to. So 2 pieces at 31 by 4. Now I'm ready to install the zipper in between these 2 pieces, and then I'll add the bands to each end. And I'm ready to sew the zipper into the band piece, and I want to turn under 1 inch. I use this guide on the table and turn under 1 inch, and then I should be able to use the stripe to line it up the rest of the way down. You can pin it if you want to.
We're using a number 5 YKK coil zipper for this application. This is a continuous length zipper, and we will add a zipper slider to the zipper after we've sewn it to the 2 bands on the outer edge. Notice that Cindy is carefully folding the fabric, following the pattern of the fabric, so that it is folded approximately 1 inch under, and the fold is directly in the middle of the zipper's teeth as she sews. At the beginning and the end, she does some reversing to lock the stitch in place.
Just trim the zipper off even with your fabric and add the other side.
Again, she's creating a 1-inch hem here. She uses the edge of the table to measure that 1-inch hem. And then this 1-inch hem is laid so that it's directly up against the fold of the opposite side. The presser foot is riding along the zipper's teeth, so that places the stitch approximately a 1/4 inch away from the zipper's teeth. We're sewing into the zipper's flange. Again, she's carefully folding the zipper as she sews. When she gets to the other end, she'll do some reversing to lock the stitch in place. Do not forget to install the zipper slider. Here Cindy is using the slider, and she's making sure that the slider puller is facing the outside of the fabric. She starts with the skinny end feeding in backwards, and the fat end is facing out, and she pulls the zipper apart as she pushes the slider on.
And now I can add the zipper to the middle of my 2 band pieces. And I'll use a piece of scrap fabric as my zipper stop on each end.
Outside surfaces are facing each other. The zipper is unzipped at the end. The slider is very close to that end, but it is unzipped and the slider's out of the way. She will start sewing a 1/2 inch from the raw edges of the fabric where they're matched up, but before she reaches the zipper, she'll place that scrap piece of fabric folded in half so the fold is facing in towards the length of the zipper, and sew directly through that and the zipper, securing the end of the zipper well. She'll do the same thing to the opposite end, adding on the band there as well. Outside surfaces must face each other. She flips it here so that she can actually look at the zipper's side. Even though it's the same process, it's just a little bit easier to have the zipper up. And that also affords us putting on the zipper stop. Our banding, or boxing, with zipper plaque is now complete.
Okay, here's the 4 clips that I put in the side of the cushion for the tuck, so I'm going to go ahead and put those in now.
You may want to go back to one of the cushions that haven't been torn apart and look at those clips or tucks. Notice that they are tucked forward towards the front of the cushion. Here's a look ahead at our finished cushion. You will need to duplicate that when sewing these into the plate. Think of the center of this length of fabric as our forward edge. Notice Cindy folds the pleat or the tuck forward towards that center location here for these 2 tucks. Now the sewing machine is basically at the center position or the forward edge of the cushion. So notice the tucks go the opposite direction here. So 2 tucks at the top and 2 tucks at the bottom, all facing in towards the center of the cushion or forward edge. Sewing the tucks in now, before we sew the banding on, makes it so we don't have to worry about it in a later step.
And I need to do that on both sides.
These tucks or pleats are not necessarily required. It's just the style of the way that this cushion was made on the sofa. So they don't have to be put in if you don't want. The process is the same, so we're going to skip ahead.
I'm going to fold this is the back of the cushion in half and mark a clip in the center so I can get the zipper centered. And I'm going to do that on both ends.
So this is the plate, and she is putting a clip at the forward and the back edge of this plate, folding it directly in half.
And then I'm also going to do it on the zipper. Folding the zipper in half and clipping on each side.
When placing these clips in the fabric, make sure again that you do not place the clip deeper than about 1/4 inch so it does not go into the seam allowance, which is 1/2 inch.
I'm going to do the same at the end of the cushion, put a clip in the center, or the end of the band, I mean.
The band is basically the boxing. It can be called band or boxing.
And I'm also going to fold the cushion in half and match the tucks up and put a clip in between those.
So again, this is the plate, and she's putting a clip at the forward edge of the plate between the tucks. There are 2 tucks on top and 2 tucks on the bottom.
So that gives me reference points all the way around the cushion to make sure the band is in the right place.
Now Cindy lays the plate so that the outside surface is facing up, and she'll lay the banding or boxing so that its outside surface is facing down. So outside surfaces are facing each other. She finds the clip at the middle of the zipper plaque and the clip at the back edge of the plate, matches those up, and starts sewing around the perimeter 1/2 inch from the raw edge of the fabric. We have been sewing this cushion with the Reupholster Ultrafeed LS1 sewing machine, and it is set into the Reupholster industrial tabletop with the Workhorse servo motor.
Make a clip here at the corner so that this will take the corner for you.
The clip will allow the fabric to take the turn. We bury the needle at the corner, lift the presser foot, rotate the fabric on the needle, lower the presser foot, and then continue to sew.
I'm only going to sew here about 1 inch or 1.5 inches because remember I allowed enough for this piece to fold up under here to protect the end of the zipper, and I don't know exactly how much that is until I sew the rest of it on. So I'm going to stop stitching right there and then come down here and match the center of my band to the center mark here.
Cindy matches up the notch that she placed in the banding or boxing with the notch that was placed in the plate and then pins it in place.
And then I'm going to stitch back to the stitching that I just stopped, and I'll be able to see where I can fold that band.
The front of the cushion has those pleats or tucks. They've already been sewn in, so we don't have to worry about it now. But we also have to round the front edge of the cushion. Notice that she's sewing right inside of where she's sewed those tucks in place, so that stitching that we sewed earlier is not visible because it'll be on the inside of the cushion. A second advantage to having the boxing or the banding too long, the 3 extra inches to create the nice beautiful pocket, is that you don't have to worry about the length that you cut your boxing. It will be too long, but the extra length can be sewn into that pocket, so you'll never have to worry about it ever being too short.
So you can see right here I have too much band and too much zipper. This is where I intended to fold it like this to make a little pocket to protect the end of the zipper.
You'll notice that Cindy does not do any reversing to lock the stitch in place at the beginning and the end of her sewing here. Instead, she plans to sew a few inches over previous stitches. And that is kind of risky, as thread ends may come undone. We recommend reversing at the beginning and end of each one of your stitches.
So that's the extra that I added right there. I'm going to start back here at the front of the cushion where the tucks are and go the other direction.
So this is the forward edge of the cushion where the tucks are. She begins sewing a few inches over her previous stitching that ended there. No reversing is done, but we recommend you do that. We've decided to show this entire process and not cut any of this film out. However, there will be times when we show it in double time.
Here I'm going to fold the zipper back on itself and make a clip out here so that my corners match up. Now I know that that clip needs to land on this corner, and that gives me the depth of my fold up here. I'm going to make another clip at this corner and do the same process on this side, where I stop about an inch or an inch and a half down. And go out to the end and match up the centers out here.
So again, this is the forward edge, and she's matching up the marks and pinning them. Same process.
And then sew back to the area where I just stopped. And here's the fold that we created. So go back to the front of the cushion where your tucks are. And go the other direction and go towards the fold again. I'm going to fold this seam back on itself and put my clip out on this side so I can match up my corners. And here's the fold on this side of the seam.
And now, once she rounds this corner, she has about 3 or so inches, and she'll run into the previous stitching. Do a little bit of reversing here, and you are done.
And you've made it all the way around your cushion.
Now she will slide the slider back. Remember, the cushion is wrong side out right now. And she will put her hand inside and turn the cushion right side out. It's ready for stuffing with the foam. If your foam is not in good shape, you'll find a large selection of high-density foams that are available at Sailrite. If it's in good shape, you can reuse it. We're going to reuse our foam.
So your zipper pull will hide underneath there, and that will protect the end of your zipper.
The zipper's opening is large enough that it should be fairly easy to reinsert the foam. So Cindy's just going to start pushing the foam into the cushion. When the foam is inserted all the way into the cushion cover, it is important that you insert your hand inside the cushion cover and work the foam into the corners of the cushion cover. Inserting foam into a cushion cover is a lot like wrestling an alligator, but be patient and continue stuffing until it's all inserted. Once it is, the cushion will come to life. Once Cindy's happy with the way the cushion looks, you need to look it over carefully to make sure everything's stuffed into the corners just the way you want it. Then she can close up the zipper's opening. Making a cushion with a pocket that the zipper can zip into, like Cindy has done here, makes the zipper look great and also hides the slider. So that is something that you should consider when you make your next cushion. Our cushion is now complete. We need to make 2 more for this sofa, but the process is exactly the same for all of them. Everything is done except for installing the sleeper section into the sofa. That's next. Looking at a side profile here, if you look at the area that will screw into the frame, there are 2 slide sections here and here. So the idea is if you install those 2 screws that go in that location into the frame, you'll be able to slide the frame into position and then tighten down those 2 screws and then insert any others. Now with the frame inside the chair with those 2 screws that we installed, we didn't show that, we can slide the frame onto the 2 screws and slide it into position. We recommend 2 people, one on one end and one on the other, to slide the frame in almost at the same time. Once it's in position, we can tighten down those 2 screws. For this sofa, there were 5 screws on each side. So once these 2 screws are tightened, we can reinsert the other screws that go underneath it into the holes. Sometimes to gain access to the screws, it's easier to pull out the sleeper section part way. Then you'll gain access to the screws in the back without all that hardware being in the way. Now we'll just continue to reinsert the screws into other portions to secure that frame well. We did reuse the holes that were in the frame. Even though fabric was covering them, we found them with an awl. That way the frame's in the right spot. After screwing in the frame, always check to make sure that it'll fold inside the sofa easily and unfold from the sofa. We still need to reinsert our mattress, which we took off. Taking a look at our mattress, it might be time for us to purchase a new mattress, but it's still fairly comfortable. So, does it fold up well? Yes, it does. Now all we need to do is insert the 3 cushions that we made. Insert these cushions into the sofa so that the stripes line up. If you turn one upside down, you'll find that the lines or the pattern may not line up. Our sofa sleeper is now complete. Coming up next is the materials list and the tools that we used to make this sofa sleeper or sofa bed. As we mentioned earlier, to determine how much material is required, visit the Sailrite Fabric Calculator. Visit the Sailrite website and you'll find thousands of decor and upholstery fabrics that'll work great for upholstery projects like this. It's your loyal patronage to Sailrite that makes these free videos available. Thanks for your loyal support. For more free videos like this, be sure to check out the Sayrite website or subscribe to the Sayrite YouTube channel. Be sure to click on the bell to be notified of new videos when they become available. If you have any comments or questions, be sure to give us a call or email us. We're glad to help. I'm Eric Grant, and from all of us here at Sayrite, thanks for watching.